Sanje chudan tsoje chonam lai chanchu pardo dane chamsu che dage jinso jibe sanam che rolai penchira sanje drobar sho sanje chudan tsoje chonam lai chanchu pardo Dane jamsu che dage jinsu jibe sanam che rolai benchira sanje drobar shu sanje che dan soje chonam la chanchu pardo dane jamsu che dage jinsu jibe sanam che rola Pinjira sanje drobar shor Simjia tamjia dewa dan devi jodan dembar churj Dongar dan dongar je jodan trawar churj Dongar mebe dewa tamba dan mendrawar churj Niren chadan tan traive tanyam chenpo la nebar churche. Semje tamje dewa dan devi jodan dembar churche. Dongar dan dongar je jodan trawar churche. Dongar mebe dewa tamba dan mendrawar churche. Niren chadan dan trave tanyom chenpo la nebar churche semje tamche dewa dan devi jodan dembar churche dongar dan dongar je jodan travar churche dongar mebe dewa tamba dan mendravar churche Niren chadan dan trave tanyom chenpo la nebar churche. Chomden den jambe yang lai chan tsai lo kange lo dre dim nye ten dra nye dara nam da rab sar ve chi nye ten kun chi shen si chi ni je to kara le bam tsen. Kanda si be tsen ra ma ri mun tama dong ra che se ve an zho tso kun la pu chi tar se yan la chu chu yang den su. Ru dar che ro nyo mo ni lo le che cha ro zho tse che ma ri mun se dong ra nyu gu chi ni chun tse ra chen. Dene tajen sa ju tar sun yun tene lu zo gyar se tu wu ku chu ra chu tang chu ni jen da lu mun ser jambe yang lai du se den chu je chen ra bu ser che da lu te mo mun ba rab san Kada tenju shun lu to ba ye lu zhu bo be na wa za do so.
Ineffable, inconceivable, inexpressible perfection of wisdom, not produced and not ceased, space in essence, domain of individual reflective awareness. Homage to the mother of victors from all three times. Homage to the glorious perfection of wisdom. Thus have I heard. Once the glorious one was residing at Vulture's Peak in Rashakriya together with a great assembly of monks and a great assembly of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Glorious One abided evenly in the samadhi of the aspects of phenomena called appearance of the profound. Also at that time, the noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, beholding the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom, observed that even the five aggregates are empty of substance. Then, by the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva: how should a son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage train who wishes to practice the profound perfection of wisdom? Addressed in this way, the noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said this to the venerable son of Shahadvati: Shariputra, the son of the lineage or the daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the profound perfection of wisdom should observe in this way. They should view correctly that even the five aggregates are empty of substance. Matter is emptiness. Emptiness is matter. Emptiness is not other than matter. Matter is not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling of perception, conditioning, and consciousness are empty. Thus, Shariputra, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, not produced, not ceased, stainless, not free of stain, undiminished, unfulfilled. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no matter, no feeling, no apperception, no conditioning, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no phenomenon, no eye constituent until no mental constituent, up to and including no mental consciousness constituent. No ignorance, no extinction of ignorance until no aging and death, up to and including no extinction of aging and death. There is no suffering, origin, cessation, or path, no wisdom, no attainment, no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, because bodhisattvas have no attainment, they rely on and abide in the perfection of wisdom. Their minds, having no obscuration, they have no fear, and passing entirely beyond falsity, they completely pass beyond sorrow. All the Buddhas who abide in the three times by relying too on the perfection of wisdom have fully awakened into the unsurpassable, true, and complete enlightenment. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom is the mantra of great insight, the mantra of the unsurpassable, the mantra peering with the peerless, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering. Because it does not deceive, it should be known to be true. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is stated: Teata Om Kate Kate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhisoha. Shariputra, in that way, Bodhisattva Mahasattvas should train in the profound perfection of wisdom. Then the Glorious One arose from that samadhi and praised the noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva. Well done, son of the lineage, it is like that. Son of the lineage, it is like that, just as you have taught it, the profound perfection of wisdom should be practiced. Even the Tathagatas admire it. After the Glorious One had thus spoken, the venerable son of Sharadvati, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Avalokiteshvara, and all of those surrounding, and the entire world with its gods, humans, demigods, and Gandharvas, in admiration, praised the words of the Glorious One. Teata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhisoha. Oh, did I do that already? Good afternoon. Welcome to all. We have begun covering, in the general overview, the main subject of this course, perfection of wisdom. We considered the term prajna, wisdom. We looked at the etymology of this term. We also saw that prajna is not necessarily always something that is specifically connected with the Buddhist path. That it has also an ordinary meaning. There's natural prajna, ultimate reality, if you will, of our mind, Buddha nature, but also we can speak of prajna in terms of intelligence, our faculty for understanding. Then there's also, in an ordinary sense, this can connect with our curiosity, our capacity for understanding, and this disposition for understanding. of course, then there is another meaning. We saw this concerns cultivating this quality, this capacity for understanding, to understand in the subtlest way. Understanding means not only the way that we see it ordinarily in terms of having a representation or a concept, but also understanding more directly, beyond words. We see that prajnaparamita is also this direct knowledge without representations, without concepts. So just a short aside here. I think it's important for us to discern that here we're talking about intelligence, capacity for understanding. And once we say that it's non-conceptual, this is not the same as all non-conceptual states. Simply that it's possible to be free from representations and free of thoughts, but that in itself doesn't mean discerning or knowing. That's a certain subtlety, but it's necessary to discern this. The idea is not just to cultivate an absence of thoughts. For example, a child or even an animal doesn't necessarily have thoughts, doesn't necessarily have mental representations necessarily, at least not as elaborate as ours, but they don't. It's not because of that this state translates into intelligence or the capacity for understanding that we're talking about. We're talking about intelligence that is the capacity for understanding, truly developing all the potential of our mind. It's necessary to approach this. In order to approach this way of knowing that is non-conceptual, it's important not to confuse it with a simple absence of thought or a brutish state that is, in fact, fundamentally ignorance. That's just a short point. So on the one hand, we explored the emptiness of phenomena. Then there's a subjective aspect of the understanding of reality. Ultimately, these two things are not separate or distinct. Both are free of substance in and of themselves. However, in terms of progression in this understanding, in terms of sharpening our intelligence, honing our ability for understanding, it's possible that we don't see the ignorance that we're currently experiencing. So conventionally, we talk about progress. And also perfecting wisdom. The perfection of wisdom is sometimes personified in iconography by a sword, a double-edged sword that cuts both objects grasped and the subject that is grasping. In iconography, it can also be this double-edged sword that is a flaming sword that lights up what is around it. In other words, allows us not to stray, not to lead ourselves astray. with all of the games that ego may undertake, all in this case, all illusions are dissipated. In a way, there's no shadow area, there's nothing unknown in wisdom. Everything that occurs in the mind, we are completely aware of it. We're completely aware of the reality of mind, aware of all confusion, and the way in which we liberate ourselves. Another iconographic representation is of perfection of wisdom. Prajnaparamita is the mother of all Buddhas. It's a deity. This wisdom can be represented as a deity. It's a kind of allegory in the sense that it is through this knowledge that enlightenment is actualized. Through this perfect wisdom that enlightenment is accomplished. And in this way, this wisdom is the mother of the Buddhas, gives rise or gives birth to enlightenment. So it's personified as a feminine deity, the mother of all Buddhas. And we can see it in the homage that precedes the sutra. There is this praise to the mother of all Buddhas. When we use this term, the perfection of wisdom, this concerns the meeting reality as it is, beyond all representations. It is knowledge of the way of being of phenomena, the suchness of phenomena, in other words, the emptiness of all phenomena. In the Great Vehicle, the perfection of wisdom is the most important quality. For example, for a bodhisattva, a beginning bodhisattva who aspires to enlightenment, a beginner who is generating bodhicitta for the first time, relative bodhicitta, of course. When they develop it, as soon as they develop it, the bodhisattva commits to following the bodhisattva path, and they will commit to cultivating certain qualities that we call the 6 paramitas, the 6 perfections. This consists in generosity. Dana is generosity. Shila, ethical discipline. Shanti, patience. Diligence, virya. Dhyana, stability of mind. And then wisdom. These are qualities that are commonly taught in Buddhism that have an important place in the Great Vehicle specifically. They make up the essence of a bodhisattva's practice. A bodhisattva commits to cultivating generosity, discipline, patience, diligence, mental stability, and wisdom. The first 5 of these qualities are, in a certain way, auxiliary to the perfection of wisdom. They are considered paramitas only in the measure to which they are associated with or informed by wisdom. In other words, the other qualities are cultivated on the basis of this wisdom. And then in this way, they can contribute to the perfection of wisdom and to enlightenment and to the activity of enlightenment. But on their own, the first 5 qualities are considered, if we had to illustrate it in a certain way, we could say that the first 5 qualities are like a group of blind people. They don't lead to enlightenment on their own. Generosity, discipline, patience, perseverance, and mental stability are important, but without wisdom, they do not lead to enlightenment. They're connected with developing wisdom and the activity of wisdom. A bodhisattva, in order to accomplish the benefit of beings, out of all of these qualities, in fact, that's why I mentioned this experiment is not to give an exhaustive presentation, but to say, in fact, there are 108 aspects of the paramitas. So we could discuss them at length. However, just to show you that if we have actualized prajnaparamita, then the other qualities of generosity, etc., are naturally expressed. They flow from prajnaparamita, in fact. It's not that the other qualities can produce prajnaparamita, rather that if we truly realize prajnaparamita, these other qualities arise. On the other hand, as a beginner, if we develop these qualities, then we can get closer to prajnaparamita, but they're not themselves the cause of wisdom. On the other hand, if this wisdom is present, then the other qualities, the other paramitas, will also be there. It is said in the Vajrasamadhi Sutra, if we do not stray from the prajnaparamita, then the 6 paramitas will be assembled. In other words, if we accomplish prajnaparamita, then we also perfect the other 5 paramitas: generosity, discipline, patience, perseverance, and mental stability or calm. An example can help to understand this. Concerning generosity, generosity is giving, which is often in opposition to greed or attachment. But when we no longer distinguish the substantiality of the agent, the act, and the object of the act, then there is no longer any form of greed or avarice. There's nothing to hold on to. There's no further attachment of any kind, no expectations either. Generosity is giving with no expectations. And once the perfection of wisdom is present, then there's naturally no further reflection, no further expectations. We can make this kind of distinction concerning ethical discipline, patience, perseverance, samadhi, and also prajna. Furthermore, among all practices, it is said that prajnaparamita is by far, cultivating prajnaparamita is by far the most superior among all practices, whether this is studying, reflecting, meditating. Among all of these, if we can truly actualize prajnaparamita, then this is supreme. In Buddhism, for example, we engage in 3 jewels for the Buddhist teaching. The actions that we may express towards the prajnaparamita, taking refuge in the 3 jewels, the respect that we show for representations of the Buddha's body, speech, and mind, actions to purify negative past actions, negative karma, if you will. We seek to generate bodhicitta. And if we manage to cultivate, if we manage to truly access prajnaparamita, perfection of wisdom, and this is the supreme form of offering. The supreme form of offering is truly taking refuge, true bodhicitta. This is the greatest offering. They are all affected by this realization. Also, trying to understand the teaching on emptiness, the prajnaparamita, has enormous benefits, even if it's just a relative approach at our level. But then the more that we become familiar with the perfection of wisdom, then our understanding becomes clearer, and we're able to act in a relevant and compassionate way concerning others, but also ourselves. Our mind naturally engages in virtuous actions, and all the afflictions, desire, hatred, self-centeredness, all the negativities of our minds naturally dissipate. And all distractions also are surpassed. And particularly attachment to this life, all forms of attachment that we may have are dissipated. Next, in terms of terminology, there are many synonyms for the perfection of wisdom. Omniscient wisdom, suchness, true reality, non-duality, emptiness, the mother of Buddhas, the unique taste of emptiness. These are all synonyms for the perfection of wisdom. But the perfection of wisdom is, as we saw, non-dual wisdom, that of the Tathagatas or Buddhas, ultimately. So now perhaps we could look at the text together to go over the text in general I think many of you have already followed along with the explanations from the previous sessions. You already have an idea, but especially for those who follow this text for the first time, the text that we're reciting begins with an homage in English, sorry, an homage to the perfection of wisdom that is attributed to Rahula, who is not part of the text itself, in fact. The text begins with the title, and then in my translation, I also left, according to convention, the title in Sanskrit, and then also the Tibetan, which is what I base my translation on, since it's the language that I master, whereas I only know Sanskrit a bit. You have the Sanskrit title, Bhagavati Prajnaparamita Hridaya Sutra. The term Bhagavati, translated by glorious, Chomdente in Tibetan, and then Prajna, which is an epithet of Bhagavati. Prajna, wisdom, paramita, perfection, hridaya, heart, essence, and sutra. So the heart of the glorious perfection of wisdom, sutra. Glorious is somewhat limited in terms of a translation. There are several meanings here. Then below the title, there's an homage. So, and here I just included homage to the glorious perfection of wisdom, which was added by the translator from Sanskrit to Tibetan. Then comes the text itself. There are 3 parts to the text itself. The first part, that is a prologue, the description of the scene in which the teaching occurred. The first 2 paragraphs in this translation. And then comes the body of the text, the teaching itself. And the teaching is given in a detailed way and then in a shortened way. The detailed teaching is the 4 following paragraphs, and then the abridged version is the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, Teata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasam Gate Bodhisoha, and then there is the epilogue of the text in the last 2 paragraphs. So that gives kind of a structure. So it begins, thus have I heard. Once the glorious one was resting at Vulture's Peak in Rajagriha, together with a great assembly of monks and a great assembly of bodhisattvas. So that's a common prologue. Common to other literary texts of the perfection of wisdom, and then a specific prologue to the teaching given here. At that time, the glorious one abided evenly in the samadhi of the aspects of phenomena called appearance of the profound. Also at that time, the noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, beholding the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom, observed that even the 5 aggregates are empty of substance. Then, by the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva: how should a son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage train who wishes to practice the profound perfection of wisdom? So, here, this is the specific prologue. I'm summarizing in a bit, reviewing here, because we already covered this in great detail. But what we can see right away, the Buddha, who is seated in a specific meditation, the meditation of the appearance of the profound, and then the Bodhisattva, Avalokiteshvara, who is one of the 8 great sons of the Buddha, one of the 8 princes or 8 great bodhisattvas. He is among them. He is the personification of kindness and compassion of all bodhisattvas. And his name means one who constantly cares for all sentient beings. Avalokita Ishvara. Trinlay in Tibetan, meaning who observes, who is constantly looking over, watching over, constantly watching over sentient beings. And then Ishvara, who has the capacity, who is endowed with the power to help beings. Here in the audience, in the entourage of the Buddha, he is observing the emptiness of all phenomena. And then we see immediately here Shariputra, who is ordinarily considered the most brilliant, is put in the position of the one who doesn't know and who asks the question to Avalokiteshvara: how should one practice the profound perfection of wisdom? In this text, the Buddha doesn't speak, he doesn't give the teaching, if I may. He only speaks at the end of the text in response to the explanations given, and the explanations themselves are given by Avalokiteshvara. He answers Shariputra's Shariputra's question, and explains how we practice profound, perfect wisdom. After the explanation that he gives, his teacher approves, in a way, confirms. His teaching is confirmed by the Buddha, who says that it is exactly like this, it is like this. And his teaching, which is brought about by the Buddha's presence, is considered to be the Buddha's words, even though the Buddha himself did not pronounce it. But it's an explanation that is incited by the Buddha's presence. The answer that Avalokiteshvara gives is: Shariputra, the son of the lineage or the daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the profound perfection of wisdom should observe in this way. They should view correctly that even the 5 aggregates are empty of substance. So here there's first an explicit teaching that says that the 5 aggregates are intended to be an exhaustive description of all of the physical and mental components of an individual. We tend to think of ourselves as one person. And often our grasping applies to our body, me, my mind as me, and depending on our view, of course. But the Buddha shows that the individual, the person, is not made up of a single unit. There's nothing singular about a person. A person is made up of components, multiple components, and is therefore an aggregation, and not just one, but a multitude of aggregations that we can split into 5. So the 5 aggregates. First, the physical aspect, often translated by form. In this translation, matter, in any case, the physical body. Then the other aggregates, which are mental, feelings, perceptions, conditioning, and consciousness. These are the other aggregates. These aggregates, what we can see here in this they should view correctly that even the 5 aggregates are empty of substance. So we can understand here that there is no self, just aggregates. So we might say a notion that we can find expressed or affirmed in other philosophical views or religious views in terms of a substantial self, an Atman, something that exists independently and independently from the 5 aggregates or from our psychophysical makeup, something that is one and substantial that we might find within or indivisible from the 5 aggregates, in some way a permanent, indivisible, singular entity cannot be found. We can see that everything we find when we analyze are simply components. So the idea of the self of an individual, of the substantiality of I, is surpassed. Because even conventionally, self does not have any existence. Even in terms of ordinary observation, we can look and we won't find it. We'll only find the physical, psychophysical components. We might think that even if there's not a self, there is that the 5 aggregates themselves truly exist, that they're made up of elements, characteristics that are distinct. They arise, they have causes and conditions, they disappear. And here Avalokiteshvara says, not only do we find no self, but even the aggregates, the components that we take to be a self in a mistaken way, they themselves don't have any substance. So in a certain way, the difference here is that the self is non-existent in terms of an entity that's not observable, but the aggregates can be observed, but they're free of any substantiality. We may think that there's something like the physical body, but the body is made up of skin, organs, flesh, all various elements, and these elements are made up of, in our consideration today, cells made up of atoms. And we cannot find an element that exists without depending on all the other elements. There's not something that exists on its own, an indivisible physical element as one. So in this way, they are empty of substance. The term here is Rang Shin. It's an important term. This is the term Swabhava in Sanskrit. In order to understand the term emptiness, we're saying that something is empty, but what is it empty of? It's empty of Swabhava. So then it's very important to understand the notion of Swabhava. Bhava means to exist, and Swa is considering that it's an Indo-European language, may have the same root as French word soi, which in English is self. So in this case, this means that without existing without depending on something other than itself. So in other words, matter does not have existence in and of itself, or an identity in and of itself. This is connected with this notion in the West of being. I think the Greeks have an idea, ousia, being in and of itself, what exists. And this corresponds with our idea that if something is there, it is perceived. It is indeed because it has a reality, specific characteristic, its own existence. So this connects with the way that we apprehend reality. We attribute the things that we interact with a reality, a distinct reality, and a substantial reality that exists on its own. So here Avalokiteshvara says, physical matter, the body, does not have any being in and of itself, as well as the other aggregates, such as feelings, perceptions, etc. So, for example, when we feel something, pain, for example, we grasp it and I feel it. It exists. It's something. I grasp it. Perceptions are also connected with notions, concepts, thoughts. It's black, it's white, it's good, it's bad. This conception that I have, I think things as existing. I conceive of something and then I attribute an existence to this thing. What we call the conditioning phenomena are the power connected with our action, with our volition. For example, here, this concerns mental events that accompany every moment of consciousness, every facet. For example, the omnipresent mental events, the 5 that determine an object, the 11 virtuous, the 6 root afflictions, related afflictions, the non-specific or variable mental events. These sort of powers that condition our perception and our becoming. That's what we call the conditioning phenomena. Then there are consciousnesses, the 5 sense consciousnesses, and the mental consciousness, the 6 consciousnesses. Sometimes there's also more detailed descriptions of 8 consciousnesses. And so all of these elements, all of the psychophysical components are free of being in and of themselves, free of substance. It's necessary to understand this. Avalokiteshvara tells us. And then he goes into detail. Matter is emptiness. Emptiness is matter. And other translations you may see, form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. There are different translations for the term here. In Sanskrit, it's rupa. Rupa designates not only appearance or form of a thing, but also physical reality. In other words, what we ordinarily call body or matter. But of course, there are more details given in the Abhidharmas concerning the 5 aggregates. 5 aggregates. Then, in the explicit general presentation, all phenomena are emptiness. They are without characteristic, meaning they have no essence of their own. They don't have any substantial existence, and therefore they don't have any cessation. They're not something that becomes nothing. They're also not stained, not free of stain, undiminished, unfulfilled. The first point, matter is emptiness. Emptiness is matter. Emptiness is not other than matter. Matter is not other than emptiness. This formulation is what we call the quadruple depth, fourfold depth, we could say. Then phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, not produced, not ceased, stainless, not free of stain, undiminished, unfilled. That is the eightfold depth. Then within emptiness, there is no matter, no feeling, no apperception, no conditioning, no consciousness. That's the 5 aggregates. No eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no phenomenon, no Those are the 12 ayatanas and the 18 dhatus. No I constituent until no mental constituent, up to including no mental consciousness constituent. No ignorance, no extinction of ignorance until no aging and death, up to and including no extinction of aging and death. This part concerning no ignorance until no death, that's the 12 links of dependent arising. Then there's no suffering, origin, cessation, or path. This refers to the Four Noble Truths. Then no wisdom, no attainment, no non-attainment. All of the elements of the Buddhist doctrines are here as well and analyzed and described as being emptiness. Then it's described here that is by relying on the absence of grasping of any substance that we perceive reality as it is, and bodhisattvas eliminate all obscurations and arrive at the full and complete enlightenment. That's the extensive presentation. In this presentation, there is an explicit premise where a certain number of elements are laid out, and then it is stated that these elements are free of essence in and of themselves. There's no argument in terms of why it's emptiness. It's not described. It's just a list of affirmations that all of these things are devoid of essence in and of themselves. So in order to better understand the analysis, it's necessary to particularly hear Nagarjuna's teaching and the teachings of his disciples, Chandrakirti, for example. And also in Chandrakirti's teachings, there are descriptions of the 10 bodhisattva levels or grounds. Then comes an implicit subject, a subject that's not presented explicitly, but the implicit teaching, how this wisdom is actualized. How do we understand emptiness? So here, we see that the 5 aggregates are free of substance. This refers to Sambhara Marga, the path of accumulation. Then matter is emptiness, emptiness is matter. The fourfold depth. This refers to the Prayoga Marga, the path of preparation or junction. Then the eightfold depth refers to Darashana Marga, the path of seeing. And then the list of all these themes, the 5 aggregates, the 12 ayatanas, the 18 dhatus, the 12 links of dependent arising, the 4 noble truths, listing of all of these points, corresponds with the Bhavana Marga, the path of familiarization, training, or meditation. And then the Lakshesha Marga is this aspect. Therefore, Shariputra, because bodhisattvas have no attainment, they rely on and abide in the perfection of wisdom. Their minds having no obscuration, they have no fear, and passing entirely beyond falsity, they completely pass beyond sorrow. this is the aspect of the path of no more learning. Then there's the brief explanation of the mantra, Te Ta Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasam Gate Bodhisoha. This also presents the 5 paths. Literally, it is as such. Go beyond, go completely beyond to illumination, such it is. This indicates the 5 paths. That's the most abridged formulation of a bodhisattva's path to enlightenment. That gives you an overview of the text. If you have questions, I'm listening. It's a question concerning what you said this morning, what you've also already said during other sessions, to see if I understood the link between generating enlightenment, taking vows, and the path of accumulation. Can we say that from the moment that I have generated bodhicitta of aspiration and action in my own mind, then am I on the path of accumulation, or is there another preparation? I was wondering. So then, can we say where we are ourselves, generally, on the path? It's important to try to see, yes. We should try to see where we are. If we don't know, then it's complicated. It's difficult for others to know. Our mind is not accessible to others, is not as accessible to others as it is for ourselves. It's important to try to see first our understanding. Begin with, have we really generated bodhicitta or not? This depends on our sincerity, the sincerity of our aspiration of attaining enlightenment for the benefit of beings. Yes or no? Do we really experience love and kindness for all beings without exception? If in our heart there's still rancor or a resentment towards someone, then perhaps bodhicitta was sincere at a moment, in the moment, but the obstacles are still there. That's why it's relative bodhicitta. It's not, it's very limited. There is confidence. This bodhicitta relies on confidence, and not just an intuition, but a glimpse, an authentic glimpse, a certain conviction in the validity in the practice of Dharma, that we have real confidence. And on this basis, then we know that enlightenment is something that's possible, that I can really attain. And accompanying this, we have real love and compassion for all beings. In the teachings, it's not said, first love your parents and then those that are close to you, and don't pray for others. It's necessary to see all beings like our parents, like someone who is dear to us, That's a first point. We can know that pretty clearly. We can know how we think about others. When I see someone else, is there a certain contempt or disdain? Is there jealousy that arises? I can know that immediately. When all of these afflictions are present, then even if partially we have a certain inclination towards bodhicitta, it's still quite weak. It's necessary to keep cultivating it, particularly cultivate these four qualities: love, compassion, joy, and equanimity. These four qualities are very important. And we can do this in daily life, every day. And from the moment that relative bodhicitta is truly, sincerely generated, and we don't go against the bodhisattva's action or behavior, then we truly enter the path of accumulation. But we can leave it. Bodhisattva vows can be damaged and broken. We can also no longer aspire to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all beings, but simply wish to attain nirvana, the individual nirvana of an arhat. That's also a great obstacle for a bodhisattva, not working for the benefit of all beings, not aspiring to the perfection of wisdom. We'll know where we are. And not so much, maybe I'm on the 10th bodhisattva level. No, we necessarily know. How can I say? It's a progression. That path that we're aware of. It's not as if it's not something external. It's simply the transformation of our mind. We start with a mind that's confused, egotistical, tormented by the afflictions. So if the Dharma has been utilized, has been an antidote for us, well, just look, have your afflictions lessened. If your afflictions are only growing, then Dharma is just words. You haven't applied it. It's said that the sign of having studied the Dharma, just simply, seriously having studied the Dharma, is that naturally we become someone peaceful, the master of our senses. And proof in meditation is that we have fewer afflictions, that the afflictions have been appeased. This morning you said to us concerning the physicalists, what establishes that there is no life after death? And so then I was thinking, reflecting, if I exchange with someone, a physicist, well, what establishes in Buddhism that there is life after death? And I think I wouldn't be able to answer. Okay. So what's your question? You want me to give you the answer, what you should say? Some elements of an answer. I gave you a bit this morning. The argument can be relatively simple. There are various ways of seeing it, but the argument can be fairly simple to the extent that, for example, the description, all the descriptions that we make of reality in terms of all physicists, astrophysicists, mathematicians, or we are associating words, concepts, and measures to what is given to us by our mental and physical senses and perceptions. We take this description to be reality, when in fact they are just descriptions. Reality, in and of itself, physical reality, we don't perceive it. We only perceive, first, our perception, which is a representation, and then on top of this, we attribute other descriptions. This allows us to interact with this perception, but in no way does it allow us to affirm the substantiality of this perception. In other words, I can say, well, today I believe neurobiologists say somewhat the same things concerning our perception. In other words, our perception is kind of hallucination of reality, that colors, forms, all that we perceive is simply something that we hallucinate. They say that our brain is hallucinating, but it doesn't in any way correspond with physical reality. And so what is physical reality beyond what we know? We can't know it in any way beyond our mind. We suppose that it's there, but if it is there, it must be one or multiple. So it has no substantiality. In terms of our experience, to say that an object of perception is the source of perception is weak. We have a conception of a physical reality that exists, and then we say that consciousness derives from that. We don't really know that. This is in fact only perception. First off, thank you for your presentation of complicated things that is nevertheless accessible. It's rather some reflections that I have concerning the teaching. For example, dukkha, the fact that we don't see that things don't exist in the way that they are, that this is a suffering. Of course, we're sensitive to the first suffering, it's very clear. The second one, that pleasures no matter how intense they are ephemeral. And then the fact that even when things are good, tomorrow or some other day, there's something. So my first reflection is that, okay, there's something that's not quite right for myself. I can see this, but I think that in the world in general, this is the case. It's not something particular to me. And so then I think, okay, so then how does this happen? Why does this happen? It's like Obelix that fell into the pot of samsara. There's something very subtle. It'll require so long, so many lives that will be necessary to help us understand this flaw. We have the how, but not the why. So I guess that's my question. There are various elements of an answer. Certain masters say, for example, it's like vision, our visual faculty. The visual faculty sees, but it does not have the ability to see itself. The eye sees, but it can't see itself. So the capacity of our mind, there's an image that's given, like very pure gold. When it is mind, it's tarnished. Once it's mind, gold tarnishes. Even if the nature of the gold is pure, it naturally tarnishes. There's an aspect of impurity that occurs. There's another analogy, maybe one that'll speak to you more. I can't think of it right this second. The idea is that confusion is a possibility. It's on the level of what's possible. Mind doesn't recognize itself for what it is. And in other teachings, there's a kind of, it's not exactly an origin myth, but it's a sort of more explicit explanation for this subject. In certain esoteric explanations or teachings, it's said simply that mind didn't recognize its reality. It may be that it recognizes it. It's affirmed in certain teachings that there are the Buddha Samantabhadra, Kuntu Songpo, recognized the nature of his mind and then did not become attached to appearances, did not grasp substantiality, and didn't fall into duality grasping, and has always been as so. And that's one of the possibilities. But we didn't know how to see the nature of mind. We didn't recognize emptiness. So we grasped appearances and samsara appeared. even though our reality is fundamentally not different from that of Buddha Samantabhadra. So in other words, there are these different possibilities. The possibility of those who are in samsara, like us, and then those who were in samsara and became free, like the historical Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, and then the possibility like the Mantrabhadra Buddha, who was always free. So it means it's not actually required to go through samsara. The Mantrabhadra Buddha didn't go through samsara. Unfortunately, that's not our case. The reality of our mind is the same as Buddha Samantabhadra's perfection of natural wisdom that we spoke about this morning, you recall. That's present for us as Buddha nature, but it's not at all actualized. I'm sorry for the word, but I feel like there's something Machiavellian in this system, like we have to go through these hardships. And yet when I look at dukkha, I see it in something positive, because it's a bit like the dust in the oyster that makes the pearl. If we look at a human species, suffering has always been a motor to find medicine, to develop technology. Artistic creations often arrive from difficult experiences. It's like the motor that causes people to be inventive and create things. One way to look at it, but then I also see it, and you can tell me if I'm right on this, that that in the Buddha's teachings, the dukkha is like the thing that allows us to go in the right direction. Rinpoche replies, well, suffering is present because we're not in our original reality. It's the result of confusion. And so suffering is constantly a reminder that can bring us back to our original reality. But the problem is that we don't know how. We seek out all kinds of means. We make art, we make discoveries, but unfortunately, we continue to suffer. And so this is the great gift of the Buddha, is that he shows us very clearly how. And not with artifice or confabulation or something else, but by way of discernment, the most supreme discernment. That's why Buddha seeks to help us actualize it. And this is how all suffering, all discomfort can be dissipated in general. So suffering, yes, it can be important to help us to persevere. Because if we don't seek to practice, then suffering will continue perpetually. It doesn't exhaust itself. I have a lot of questions, but I'm going to start with the one that's hardest for me to figure out. In the expression, form is emptiness and emptiness is form, I have a hard time understanding. If I take the first part, form is emptiness. If I look at a thought in terms of form, a cat, I can see that a cat is a manifestation of mind. I can see that there's a manifestation that appears tangible, but is present at the same time. So the idea that thought is emptiness, that we might see in practice, that I can sort of grasp, but the fact that emptiness is form, that I don't understand. What does this add? I have a hard time grasping that. There are various points, and we'll come back to this. We'll come back to this point tomorrow. The first thing that this shows is that we look at what we grasp as a substance, and then someone says, this is emptiness. We might think that the cat or dog, all the descriptions that you can give, or the things that we conceptualize, we can see that they're insubstantial, but then we may grasp this insubstantiality. We may think, in philosophy, for example, there's this idea of noumen, a being that is beyond appearances, a substance beyond appearances, a self that is beyond appearance. So we may say, okay, well, appearances don't exist, but there is a reality beyond that, and that's emptiness. And that is reifying emptiness. Saying that emptiness is a thing that is beyond appearances, and that's the true being of things. So saying that emptiness is not other than form means that it's not something that we'll find. It's not something that exists in and of itself. It's not a substance of some kind that we can grasp. And emptiness cannot in any way be found independently from form or matter that it designates. So the substantiality of this insubstantiality of matter or emptiness is not a thing, but it's not other than matter. And matter is matter, or it appears as matter due to its insubstantiality. We'll come back to this tomorrow. This is especially not to reify emptiness as something else. Thank you, Rinpoche. When are the texts from? And were they always identical to what they are today? Okay, on this subject, the tradition attributes this teaching to the Buddha. It seems that these teachings were gathered or written down by bodhisattvas. It's said that there are different texts of different lengths. For example, the Gandharvas conserved a version of the Prajnaparamita in 1 billion stanzas, and the gods conserve a version of the Prajnaparamita in 100 million stanzas, but we don't have access to these texts. So the tradition says that among the Buddha's disciples, that the Buddha did not have only human disciples, that other individuals who are not visible to us gathered them and conserved them. this is also what's affirmed in terms of the text that we do have access to. The longest version of the Perfection of Wisdom is that in 100,000 stanzas that is part of the Buddhist canon, the Tibetan Buddhist canon. We say that the master Nagarjuna found them. After the Buddha's parinirvana, the Bodhisattva disciples were not very numerous. These texts were forgotten and preserved by the Nagas. Nagarjuna went to the world of the Nagas. There are various ways of understanding this, but in any case, he went and brought back the works on the Perfection of Wisdom, notably, including the longest version in 100,000 stanzas. Then, in terms of the text, there is a Sanskrit text. I haven't done any particular research on this subject, but I don't know if they still exist or if they were lost over time. Of course, we have the Tibetan translations. There are certain Chinese translations of the Perfection of Wisdom. Apparently, there are some that exist in Chinese translations that aren't present in the Tibetan. For those that do, of course, occasionally there are certain differences in certain words, but in general, there are no differences in terms of the meaning, the premise, and what is taught. These texts are exactly the same. There's no divergence in terms of the contents. Can we ask a question from those online? It can be very lonely to reflect on this subject. Is this something that we have to do on our own? Because as it's a non-conceptual subject, it's not helpful to talk about it. As a beginner, it's very hard to accomplish this path alone. It's very important to refer to the teaching and to find competent teachers who can help us correctly understand. As I said earlier, it's important not to get confused about the word non-conceptual in terms of the fact that it may be the idea of just not having thought. Only being non-conceptual could be not having any thoughts, but that would be a brutish state that doesn't translate into discernment or the wisdom that is the subject here. It's very important to have a good understanding. And then when we put things into practice, of course, we don't need company to practice. We can practice alone in silence and solitude, as the great masters of the path have done, like Milarepa and other masters. That can be a beneficial environment for practice, solitude and calm. I have a question coming back to the text. Understand that it's a very short version, but I'm sometimes a bit bothered during the recitation by the fact that there are certain sentences that are not complete, such as there is no I element up until no mental constituent. I would like to have the rest of the sentence enumerated, and particularly this part, no aging and death, up to and including no extinction of aging and death, meaning there are the 12 links, but they're not even listed one time, all of them. So if we want to reflect on the emptiness of all of these things, they're not even listed. Rinpoche says they're simply indicated. Question asker says, okay, this part is really abridged. So is there a version that's more complete? And Rinpoche says, well, if you want to, we can fill them in because we know what they are. The questioner says, yeah, but maybe we don't know. Maybe not everyone knows. It's like it's addressed to people who know all this stuff by heart. Rinpoche says, yes, indeed. It is a text that's addressed to people who already know the Dharma well. And I mean, as I said when we began, I was a bit bothered by it, but in fact, the subject of emptiness is not the subject that we begin with for practice. It's a very subtle subject. This is why I emphasize so much that it's important not to confuse it with a form of nothingness or annihilationism. The first Western scholars in the 19th century, when they started reading Buddhist texts, and particularly those of the perfection of wisdom, they decreed that Buddhism was the church of nothingness, which was a misunderstanding of what is said in terms of emptiness. So it's very easy to make this mistake. And this is why the basis, the foundation for committing to the Buddhist path is really first acquire an understanding of causality. This is the introduction that is secure, if I may, that presents no danger. Of course, if we have a superior ability, then we will correctly understand emptiness. No problem. Then we can directly go there. But there's a danger. The danger is that we understand it as nihilism. That's why straight away I wanted to set apart this danger. Then concerning the subjects that are here, the 12 links of dependent arising, the 4 noble truths, the 12 ayatanas, the 18 dhatus, these are lists that are commonly known in the Buddhist community. Those who have studied Buddhism tend to know them because those are the subjects that we study first. So here in this text, it was not considered to be necessary because Avalokiteshvara is talking to Shariputra, who of course knows these subjects by heart. So it's a recording, if I might say, of the discussion between them. So Shariputra, of course, is not us, a beginner who doesn't know the 18 dhatus and the 12 ayatanas. He knows them quite well. So that's why Avalokiteshvara spoke in this way. And so that's, in a way, that's my job to give you a list of these terms, and that's what we'll come back to. And then when you want to reflect on this, you can also reflect on this full list. So could we maybe publish a list? Rinpoche says, well, for the support, for the practice of analysis, what is recommended above all is we can reflect, as you said, but there's also there are other methods to learn, other manners to learn. For example, before placing mindfulness upon 4 objects in terms of emptiness, we can look at all of these phenomena. Thank you all for your attention. Oh, still a question. For tomorrow. Thank you.
Ye tamchi ziba ni toni ni be rana pamchi ni che ka na che balam trupa ye sibe sole androwa sho changshu simcho rimbo che ma che panam chi ju che che wa nyamba me kone kondo pewar sho.